All right, so today we are diving deep into Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now. And I know what you might be thinking, another spiritual book. But seriously, you guys, this one is different. It's got all these little golden nuggets of wisdom hidden in there, like little aha moments that you can actually use in your everyday life.
It's true. And the reach of this book is incredible. I mean, it's been translated into over 30 languages.
Mm.
Even in India, which many consider the birthplace of spirituality,
Oh, yeah.
it's made a huge impact.
That's wild. It really shows you how universal his message is. Like he's tapped into something essential about being human. One of the things that really hit me was this idea, you are not your mind.
Mhm.
Tolle talks about this difference between your true self, your being, and all that mental chatter, the ego. Have you ever felt like you were totally stuck in your own head?
Oh, absolutely. And his definition of being is fascinating. He describes it as this eternal presence. Think of the ocean. You've got the waves crashing and churning. Those are your thoughts and feelings. But underneath it all, the ocean itself is vast and unchanging. That's your being.
Whoa. Okay, that is a really helpful image. So, if that's our true nature, why do we end up feeling so miserable so often?
Well, that's where the ego comes in.
Hmm.
Tolle isn't saying that the mind is the enemy or anything, but he says the trouble starts when we get too caught up in our thoughts and build our whole identity around them. That's when we create this false sense of self.
Right.
And this false self is all about fear and insecurity. It's like the root of so much of our suffering.
It's like that story in the book about the beggar sitting on a box of gold. He has no idea about the treasure he's carrying around for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's such a powerful metaphor for how we overlook the peace and joy that's already within us.
We get so fixated on our thoughts, our worries, our desires. We completely miss out on the present moment.
And that brings us to another big one, the pain body. I have to say, this idea really resonated with me.
It's a powerful concept for sure. Basically, the pain body is this invisible backpack full of all the emotional pain we've accumulated.
Oh, wow.
And it feeds on negativity. It can show up as anxiety, anger, even physical pain sometimes.
So how do we get rid of this pain body baggage? Is that even possible?
This is where things get really interesting. Tolle argues that the key is to stop dwelling on the past and stop worrying about the future, because this obsession we have with time, it's an illusion.
Wait, time is an illusion. There's a whole section called Time is an Illusion. What does that even mean?
So what Tolle is getting at is that the present moment is all we ever really have. The past is gone. The future is uncertain. But our ego, it loves to keep us trapped in regret, worry, and what-ifs.
That makes sense. I know I spend way too much time replaying old mistakes or stressing about things that haven't even happened. So how do we escape this time warp and tap into the power of now?
It's about bringing our attention to this moment right here, right now.
Yeah.
It's like we hit the pause button on that mental movie that's constantly playing in our heads.
Right. Yeah. Easier said than done, though, right?
It definitely takes practice.
Yeah.
But Tolle offers some really practical techniques. One of my favorites is this idea of watching the thinker.
Yes. Tell me more about that one.
So it's about noticing your thoughts as they come up, but you don't get carried away by them. Imagine you're sitting by a stream watching leaves float by.
Okay, I like that.
Those leaves are your thoughts. You don't try to stop them, you just observe them. No judgment.
I love that visual. It's like you're creating space between you and your thoughts, almost like you're an observer instead of being totally caught up in all the mental chatter.
That's it. And in that space, that stillness, that's where you can start to connect with the power of the present moment. It's interesting how all these different spiritual traditions, Zen Buddhism, Sufism, they all point to presence as this key element.
Totally. And Tolle's own story is a great example. He talks about this time when he was 29 years old. He was really struggling with depression. And suddenly he had this intense realization. It was like he couldn't just keep living the way he had been.
And in that moment of surrender, when he finally stopped fighting and allowed himself to just be present with his pain, that's when everything shifted for him.
It reminds me of that line in the book, something like, the moment you fully accept what is the moment you access the power of now. It's like all that resistance we put up just melts away.
Yeah, and that's when real transformation can happen.
So we've talked about the ego, the pain body, the illusion of time. It's a lot to take in. But I'm curious, how does all of this relate to our relationships with other people?
That's where things get really interesting. Tolle has some pretty radical views about love and relationships.
Ooh.
He even suggests that love itself can become a trap when it comes from the ego.
Interesting. So you mean like needing someone else to complete us?
Exactly. He says that true love can only happen when we've learned to find that wholeness within ourselves first. Otherwise, We just end up projecting all our unmet needs onto our partners, which just creates more suffering for everyone involved.
It's like we're searching for our missing pieces in another person, instead of realizing that we're already whole.
Right. And that's how jealousy, possessiveness, all that codependency stuff creeps in. Tolle's point is that when our own cup is full, then we can approach relationships from a place of giving. We can offer love freely without needing anything back in return.
That makes so much sense. It's about loving from that place of being we were talking about earlier. And speaking of being, Tolle also had some really interesting things to say about the feminine principle and enlightenment.
Yeah. He suggests that women, because of their natural connection to things like intuition, emotion, and that creative life force, they might actually be closer to enlightenment than men.
Right. He talks about how in many cultures the divine is often seen as feminine, like the great mother or the goddess.
Exactly. And he points out that many ancient cultures instinctively used these feminine figures or analogies to describe this transcendental, formless reality. He even mentions that the Tao, which you could translate as being, is described as infinite, eternally present, the mother of the universe. He believes that by healing and integrating the collective female pain body, which he describes as this accumulation of pain and suffering endured by women throughout history, women have this incredible capacity to help usher in a new era of peace and enlightenment.
So it's like tapping into that deep well of feminine energy that's always been there. It's just waiting to be acknowledged and embraced.
Exactly. And not just for women, but for everyone. Because when we embrace the feminine, we embrace qualities like compassion, intuition, and interconnection. And those are qualities that I think the world desperately needs right now.
Wow. There's so much to think about here. I have to say this is really powerful stuff. But I have to admit, it also feels kind of overwhelming. Like, how do we actually put all of this into practice in our daily lives?
You know, that's what's so great about Tolle's work. It's actually very simple. He's not asking us to go live in a cave or anything.
Right.
He's just reminding us that we already have the power to change our lives. It's all within us in this very moment.
And so it's more about actually being present instead of just thinking about it.
Exactly. And one of the easiest ways to do that, but also one of the most powerful, is by paying attention to our breath. Just taking a few conscious breaths throughout the day can make a huge difference.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that when I'm stressed out, taking a few deep breaths can really help calm my mind.
Exactly. The breath is like an anchor. It brings us back to our bodies, back to this present moment. And from that place of presence, we actually have the power to make different choices. We can choose to respond instead of just reacting based on old patterns and habits.
So it's not about becoming some kind of unemotional robot.
No, not at all.
We're still going to feel all the feels, but it's how we relate to those emotions that really matters.
Right on. Tony's not saying we should try to deny or repress our emotions. It's more about learning to observe them without getting totally swept away.
Okay, that makes sense. So if we notice ourselves spiraling down into those negative thought patterns,
Yeah,
we can use our breath to sort of hit the pause button and choose a different path.
exactly. And that's where the real magic happens.
Yeah.
You know, it's not about trying to achieve some perfect state of bliss
Right.
where we never experience anything negative ever again.
Right.
It's about learning to navigate all of it, the good and the bad, with more presence, more grace, and more awareness.
Yeah, it's like we're taking back our power from the ego. We can step into our full potential as conscious creators of our own lives.
Beautifully said. It's a journey, for sure.
Hmm.
And it's not always easy, but it's so worth it.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm feeling really inspired. This deep dive into the power of now has really given me a lot to think about. It's a good reminder that this moment is really all we have. And that within this moment, there's this incredible potential for peace, joy, and fulfillment.
Yes. And that journey starts right now. Not tomorrow, not next week,
Yeah.
but in this very breath.
That's so true. So as we wrapped up today's deep dive, I have one last question for you. If you could go back and tell your younger self just one thing about the power of now, what would it be?
Oh, that's a good one. You know, I would say don't sweat the small stuff. Seriously, most of the things we worry about never actually happen.
Right.
And even if they do, those challenges usually end up teaching us the most valuable lessons. So relax, breathe, and trust that everything is working out exactly as it's supposed to.
Such a good reminder. And for everyone listening, we hope this deep dive into the power of now has sparked your curiosity and maybe even inspired you to explore the power of presence in your own life. Remember, this moment is a gift. It's the only place where life is truly happening.